As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Tyler, born and raised in Warrenton, Virginia, grew up with parents who each own small businesses to this day. Graduating with a degree in economics, Tyler returned to Warrenton after college to start a real estate brokerage that has grown to 19 agents and 2 staff. Additionally, he is a minority owner and instructor at the Forge Jiu Jitsu, a 6-month-old academy in his hometown. Tyler also hosts a podcast discussing the balance of entrepreneurship and parenting called Learning to Dad with Tyler Ross. His ongoing side projects include a jiu-jitsu clothing brand, All Day Jiu Jitsu, and a deck construction company called Commonwealth Decks. So, Tyler, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you being here.
Dude, thanks a lot, Andrew. I'm really excited to have a conversation with you. Just leading up to this has been fun already.
Exactly. And you know, you come from an interesting idea or an interesting background too, because both your parents were entrepreneurs as well. Like they own businesses. Is that true?
Yeah, you got it. My folks divorced when I was like 7 years old. My mom started a business, a little retail organic grocery store, and my dad was an attorney that had his own shingle. He continues to be an attorney now. In fact, we work out of the same building and have lunch every day together, 5 days a week at my mom's store.
Oh, that's awesome. And I love hearing that, especially because most of us don't have that experience of having parents that started businesses. It's not something that we, usually as entrepreneurs, we're the only ones, we're the black sheep of the family that's starting something different. And it's really interesting to hear how, it's a different world for you. Like, how was that growing up with your parents as entrepreneurs? What was the balance? I don't even want to use the word work-life balance because ours is very different, but what was that like?
You just kind of get immersed into it as a kid, when your parents are divorced too. It's not like I'm at home with mom while dad's working or vice versa. Like if my mom's at work, I'm at work with her. We had a little couch in our office and a TV, and she'd set us there and try to keep us busy while she worked. And then same with my dad. He ended up giving me little business cards and keeping me busy in the corner of his office while he worked. So first POV of seeing what it takes to get things done.
And of course, send you out and have you advertise, give out cards.
Oh man, I'm 10 years old. I'm fronting all the store shelves, and I'm learning how to do the credit card thing, and like it's cool. You get an appreciation for what it takes to see employees turn over and how people are treated and the culture of a business, and the professionalism of the attorney and the service of the retail. It was a cool blend. Both my parents worked really hard and worked a lot. And mercifully, they both had a position where they could have me and my sister. And I've since had 2 more sisters. They're the losers. They're not entrepreneurs. One's in her 3rd year at UVA law school, and the other's an occupational therapist. Like what losers?
They're not. Those are the black sheeps of your family.
Yeah,
It's usually
exactly.
the other way around.
Yeah, the top of her class law student and the occupational therapist.
Sort of like, dude, you're weird. You have a job. That's weird.
I know, right? You got a boss? What? It's great.
So tell us a little bit about what you do. Like, what is your thing? What's your ninja skill? It's always I like to start off with that.
Actually, we can go right into that because I do jiu-jitsu regularly, so I'm a legit ninja.
That's great.
So I've got a real estate brokerage. It's me, 2 staff, and 19 agents, and actually going to be 20 here in the next week or 2 because we got a new one coming on soon. So that's the kind of day-to-day, keeps me mostly occupied. We have a jiu-jitsu school I'm a minority owner in that we opened in February, so that takes up some time. And then I'm building a decking business with a friend of mine who's already a contractor, and I've written some kids' books, and of course the podcast we were talking about that I can hope to leverage into some sort of revenue at some point. But really, it's just a good excuse to talk to interesting people, and you don't always get that.
And that's the thing I love the most about podcasting is I get to talk to really cool entrepreneurs, and that's a huge thing for me is we think differently, and having other people around you who think the same way that you do, but have these different levels of experience, like having parents that were entrepreneurs to begin with, really is fun. Again, it charges up my batteries, and I'm hoping that does for listeners as well. That's one of the main reasons for it, is to just hear that, Yeah.
I bet you can't walk through a room without being inspired by something as an entrepreneur yourself. It's like, oh, look at that chair. I can figure out a better way to make that chair, figure out a different, door handle that is, or I can turn this into a business or whatever. It's constant. It's annoys the crap out of my wife.
Yep. And it's one of those things that's our ninja skill as
Yeah.
far as entrepreneurs is we're really good visionaries. We're good about asking questions. I had another, guest that has been on the podcast as well, who's like, we're constantly inquisitive. I was talking with one and he was saying like that we were the kids that went out and broke stuff just to see how it worked. How does that work? What's that do? Let's poke that and see what happens.
Could never figure out how to put it back together, but I've destroyed more VCRs and toasters and weed eater engines. So you hit the nail on the head, Andrew. Like, I'm sure you took a lot of stuff apart too.
VCRs, blenders, any electronic that sat long enough, I was going to figure out how it worked. Oh yeah, just the gambit.
How we didn't, I'm sure you stripped the plastic and rubber off
Mhm.
of a number of lamps and so I wonder if I plug this in and touch it to that, if this happens, it's a wonder that we're alive to some degree, probably.
There is definitely a survival of the fittest side of things. Yeah, there really is. There really is, and not just even because we haven't electrocuted ourselves, but our parents haven't killed us. I
Yeah.
think that's what I was doing.
Might have been sent to your room once or twice, but
Just only a couple of times.
I
But
still love to take stuff apart and look at it, and it's just fun. Yeah.
it's cool to see how it works. And I think that translates to our business because now we also want to see how does somebody else's business work? Like what sort of a marketing, what cool marketing thing are you doing that's causing you a lot of success? And gee, I want to do that too. What are you doing? What is it? I want to ask. I want to see, you know?
You totally touch on something that's near and dear to me is like the cross pollination between industries. Like
Mhm.
just because you're in the real estate industry doesn't mean that you can't learn something from the guy that's manufacturing paper or sells socks out of the trunk of his car. Like every single human being on the planet in every single industry has some applicable piece of knowledge that you can pull from there and send it directly down the pipeline of whatever it is you're doing. And it's so fun to be open to that all the time.
Absolutely. So one of the things we had mentioned your podcast, Learning to Dad, with Tyler Ross. I think it's a really important thing, and I want to brush on this too. Is our version of work-life balance as entrepreneurs is totally different than most people's. Like if you're in a 9 to 5, it will be very difficult to understand why we're answering emails at 7 p.m. on a Sunday. And it's not necessarily, it can be toxic, but it's really just most of the time it's just different. We think differently. We're passionate enough about what we do that it's not work to us. And so I want you to touch a little bit more on kind of that podcast. What caused you to found that podcast, and what have you found over interviewing people? Like, what are some common threads that you see regularly?
Well, last night I'm eating dinner with my family, and I went into the kitchen to go get a little bit more dressing, and I found myself completely lost in thought, just eating like an automaton. And I had to snap out of the thinking, and it's like, I'm with my family. I need to go back in there and eat dinner with them. And I find that is something that I needed to break. I needed to be able to focus and with my family, my kids, they're amazing and I love them so much. And I'm getting better at it as a result of talking to other people. And that was the inspiration of the podcast, was like, you talk to these like Jesse Itzler type guy who I was fortunate enough to have on as a guest on my podcast. And like, he's got more going on than any of us do, but he's figured out how to interact with his kids on a regular basis and prioritize that. And that was the inspiration of doing it, was talking to people that are busier than me, that spend more time with their kids than me, and extracting that from them and applying it in my own life.
Mhm. And I think we all have, as entrepreneurs, we've gotten to that point. And I think I'm a huge advocate for ADHD because I think that's one major ninja skill that entrepreneurs are good at. We can think in 1,000 directions at once. We constantly thinking about those different things. We're constantly going in a direction, and I think that can be difficult. Mitigating that can be difficult, especially with families.
Yeah, the thing that probably resonates the most with me that I hear is being present.
Mhm.
Like we can sit in a coffee shop and have a million ideas and fill a legal pad of different things to try. And that's fine, that ADHD. But when it comes to being with your family or your kids, you can physically be there. But if you're not present, it doesn't count. So you gotta, like Grant Cardone said, when I'm with my kids, I'm with them 100% of the time. Not that he's with them 24/7, but when he's with them and that's all he's doing. What he does and what he says may be different, I don't know, but what he said, I thought struck a chord with me where like, yeah, I might be on the couch watching TV, but I'm answering an email with my, with my kid. I just need to be there with my kid and let the rest of it go. And so as a result, I've decided that my peak earning years are going to be after my kids are 18 years old. And in the meantime, I'll just keep scratching that itch of entrepreneurial stuff in the time that I'm not with my family.
Mm-hmm. And I've had a couple of clients who've had issues with this before, where it's like we're building companies and then the family balance gets off. And it was interesting to hear that there's a way to do things, and especially with your background where your parents were entrepreneurs, but they were still involved.
Mhm.
And they were still around, and it wasn't like, well, dad's that, who is this dad person you keep talking about? No, they were involved. They had you involved in the business. Is that something you do with your kids too, where you have them involved in some way so they can start seeing developing some of the skills that I think a lot of us wish we had when we were younger?
Yeah, they're 8 and 9 years old now, 8-year-old boy, 9-year-old girl, and they come to jujitsu class with me. In fact, my daughter wants to go. I teach the 5:30 a.m. class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she started to come with me. And she like, wake me up at 4:45 in the morning. I want to go to class with you. She watches, and real estate, I'll occasionally throw them in the car when we go look at properties, and we get to walk around land. And as they get older, they get more and more involved. But I'm super proud of both of them. They have different respective ninja skills themselves. But you want to talk about an entrepreneur at birth? Like my daughter wants to do a lemonade stand every single day. She wants to go weed the neighbor's garden every single day. It's really cool. So yeah, I get to integrate with them regularly, and we're always working. Like we got back from Nags Head for a 3-day trip in Nags Head, and I had to do some work, but like we're there and doing it there all the time, and so the balance is tough, but it's required.
Mhm. But I think that's important to us as entrepreneurs. I don't have kids, but I do have a niece that lives with me, and so she just turned 11 and
Yeah.
totally entrepreneurial kid. So I proud uncle moment. She had this. She made pipe cleaner people. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. Came up with this thing on her own, made a whole bunch of these things, went to school, like $3 worth in parts, ended up with like $20 later on. So you could
Awesome.
tell.
Yeah.
You can tell they're entrepreneurs when they're young. And,
Yes.
and I like to bring her into some of the stuff in the company as well, so she can see what this is like, so she can have that model afterwards. So I think that as entrepreneurs, that's part of how we interact with the children in our lives, is by bringing them into our worlds and kind of allowing them to see it instead of, presence is good. And I think this is another part to it as well, where we bring them in and we can integrate them because we don't stop working.
Yeah.
So it has to be a little bit different interaction with them. Yeah. And we
And
sometimes find out one of them is a real genius with business, and we now know that that's something that we can build, versus somebody knowing, hey, this person's going to, I think my kid's going to be an artist. They have an aptitude for this. You learn a different ninja skill with them. Yep.
I completely agree. And exposing them to those things, letting them watch you work, letting them participate in your work, letting them watch you and their mom argue and problem solve and troubleshoot. Like you're setting an example, whether it be work ethic or relationships with people, relationships with family. And like I think that's important to do, especially if you want to cultivate an entrepreneurial spirit in your kids, or to allow them to express their own entrepreneurial spirit that's already within them. Just got to expose them and give them opportunities to try things.
Absolutely. Now, let's go back to the real estate side of things. And how did you get involved in real estate? Like, what was the story leading up to that?
So when I was 7 or 8 years old, my dad and I would sit across the breakfast table, and he'd pull out the classifieds and he'd say, okay, it's a 1989 Nissan Maxima, leather interior, burgundy color, 124,000 miles. What's it listed for? And like, because he's an entrepreneur, he's a buyer and a seller, and so it started there. I remember sitting over a bowl of Basic Four, having that conversation with my dad, and it just got the wheels clicking. And being a real estate attorney, he'd buy and sell property, and I watched him do that. And then when I was in college, I entered into a real estate licensing class, got that in 2005. And then as soon as I qualified, I opened my own company, because you had to be licensed for 3 or 5 years at the time, whatever it was. But that was my introduction into it.
Huh. Interesting. I like that. And, the hustle even started with him earlier and doing that. I like that a lot. So, And then now, of course, that moved on to jujitsu. How did that happen? Like, what was the sequence of events?
Yeah, well, it was completely not on the radar at all until October of last year. And then it was just a seed of a concept that, frankly, the circumstances where we were trying to avoid it. And then we felt in December, we felt like, okay, we have to do this. So me and two friends, you know, just said, okay, we're going to do it. And within a week, I found a space. And then within 6 weeks, we opened our doors on February 18th. So we opened in a brand new market, and we had budgeted a break even in September, but we were profitable by April. So it was really one of these things where we don't want to do it, we don't want to do it, we don't want to do it. And then the light shined on it and was like, we have to do it. And then everything was synchronistic. Like me and my two partners have these perfectly complementary skills. We love and adore each other and each other's families. And it was never about the money, which I think is why the money came so quickly, because it became profitable so quickly. So we're just reinvesting, and we're going to try to find a bigger and newer space and just keep, serving the members at the highest level we can. And, it's just kind of a fun thing to do. Instead of paying to be a member at a gym, we actually get paid to run a gym and do the same thing, more or less.
So I just want to make sure I heard that right. You started in February, and by April it was profitable?
Yes. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, we pro forma to break even in September, and yeah, we're already paying back our capital contributions, which has been a really beautiful and fun thing. Because the other two guys are not entrepreneurs. One's I mean, they are now because they have a business and run a business, but one works for the federal government as an accountant, and the other is a retired cop. So they're both used to working for the man.
Yeah.
But they all bring these different skills, and none of them really overlap, but they all fit in the puzzle really, really well.
Yeah. And it sounds like it's complementary. So you bring the entrepreneur side of things and that kind of that risk taking that entrepreneurs are really good at. So the accountant friend has the financial background to be able to budgets and the things that entrepreneurs are not good at.
Yeah, yeah.
So it sounds like they complement, which is nice. Yeah. You don't
Yeah.
find that often. That's hard to find, is that synergy between three people that can then take something off and it works well for you. Yeah.
I've had good partners and I've had bad partners, and there's nothing like good partners.
Exactly. That's so true. So you've got jujitsu, and we have that now on to, in the immortal words of Monty Python, now for something completely different. Decks.
Yeah, well, this is a result of jujitsu. My friend Grant, who's a VMI, Virginia Military Institute graduate, worked as a government contractor and then decided he wanted to own his own business. So he started a handyman business that's morphing into a general contracting business. And I adore him. He's an awesome guy, a great kid. He's got a beautiful family that's growing. And I said, you know what, I want to do something with you. What's something we could do? And said, I think I could get leads. I know he can execute the work. He's great with people. He's honest. He's got integrity. And I said, well, let's start a decking business. So we just got our license. We've got our website up, and we're going to start marketing to get business. And we've already bid 3 jobs. Actually, 2 were with the same person, but we actually bid a tree house. So he and I went out to this big, beautiful tree, and we're laying out where the support structures are going to go and where the platform's going to go. And but that is out to bid. I'm hoping it comes back and we get to execute the work. But it's one of those, again, it's not about the money. It's about helping my friend and I want to see him succeed. And if I can make a few dollars doing it, then I'd be very excited to do that. And I'll go out there and swing a hammer with him, because being outside on a beautiful day doing hard work is rewarding.
Well, it's like a good friend of mine, Kelly, says, and it's in a serial entrepreneur, been doing a bunch of stuff, but it's like, I do cool stuff with my friends, and that's how we do business. And oh, by the way, we make money on it. And I
Yeah.
think it's a fun way to do business, and it's a fun way because we're just going to go out and see what kind of cool stuff we can create. And I
Yeah.
think that's a huge part about the entrepreneur journey is creating stuff, and we're really good at that. Yeah.
Yeah, and being open to what presents itself, because while we decided we're gonna do decks, the first thing out of the chute was tree houses.
Mm.
So we bid a tree house. If we get the work, we'll build a tree house. If we do a good job, we'll get another tree house job. And a year from now, we could be the leading treehouse, contractor in our area. Like, who knows? So if you're open-minded and don't try to force it, I think the work and the job and the future kind of presents itself if you're open-minded to it.
Exactly. Exactly. And like I've heard a lot of entrepreneurs say we're really good about solving problems.
Yeah.
I don't like the way this is being done right now. This is a major issue. Let's do something else. And Adam Savage says, I reject a reality and I substitute my own. And I think it's true.
I love that.
That's what we
Yeah.
do.
I have this struggle with the word entrepreneur and label entrepreneur because I
Yeah.
feel like it's somebody that should be innovative or even disruptive to an industry. But I may be reevaluating that, and just maybe something slightly different is enough to qualify. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a real estate broker. I got real estate agents. There's nothing disruptive about that, but I do it a little bit differently than all the other people in our market.
Mhm.
And maybe that makes me an entrepreneur. I don't know, but it's a cool label.
I think when we think disrupt, we think about just completely take an entire industry and turn it on its head. And I don't necessarily think that. I think that is one valid definition of disrupt, but I think another definition of disrupt is better can opener.
Yeah,
That we are also disrupting. We're disrupting the status quo, whether it be from a large point or huge or small. We're still disrupting the status quo.
mhm,
Yeah. Yeah, and
yeah,
I think it's something that can still have like a good friend of mine started in Utah where he lives, did a CE course for real estate agents on how to do creative finance and how that works, and something that hasn't been done before and really is changing. And I think that's disruptive. Now we're teaching something different. You know,
yeah.
yeah.
I love that. And it's so hard for entrepreneurs who have a genuine idea like that to get support, emotional support, financial support when it's something that's not really been done before.
Mhm.
I really admire the people that have the sack that just put it out there and go, I'm trying something completely different. Everybody else's opinions be damned. That's harder than anything I've ever done.
Yeah, it is. And we often fail more than we succeed.
Yeah.
And having that risk tolerance or that being able to tolerate the amount of risk that we take and jumping off a cliff. And I say this constantly, we're jumping off a cliff and building the parachute on the way down.
Yeah,
Let's see if this works.
that's so well said. And failure is such a huge part of the journey. And you got to figure out how to couch failure. Because if you take it as a shot on the chin, you can sit on your butt and like be just demoralized by it. Or it's not failure, it's a checkpoint, it's a learning, it's your tuition expense to get educated to do the next thing. So anybody that's adverse to failure, I would just tell them, don't be, figure out a new way to look at it, and it'll do nothing but serve you.
I like what you just said there. You said it's a checkpoint, meaning, okay, let me see what happened. Let's just stop, check and see what's happening here. What's going on? Why isn't this working? And I think it's a nice non-judgmental way of really putting a failure into perspective. It's not a personal failure. It's let's just stop and check things right now. Let's just see what's going on. So I really like that a lot, the checkpoint. I
Yeah,
like
and
that.
you tie it back into the idea of being open to what's coming as opposed to trying to force your way through. Like, I don't know what 5 years looks like from now for this Commonwealth Decks. Like, if we decided we only built decks, then this treehouse job is a failure. Like,
Mhm.
if we only build tree houses, then the decking company is a failure. Or no,
Mhm.
maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a checkpoint to go, you suck at decks. Don't do decks. You do tree houses. So
Yep.
it's not failing at the decking company. The whole Thomas Edison light bulb thing, it's just that.
Mhm. We call it, I've heard a lot of people call them pivots. Sometimes
Pivots.
we pivot in another direction. We're being led in somewhere different, and it
Yeah.
ends up being significantly more profitable and significantly more successful and a lot more fun than the direction we were going.
Yeah, and to acknowledge those pivot points or checkpoints, again, back to being present. Like, if you don't take a genuine self-awareness check at that pivot point, you're going to screw it up,
Mhm.
probably.
Mhm.
So you have to make a deliberate, thoughtful decision and maybe you got to put your head down and just plow through, but that in and of itself has to be a deliberate and thoughtful position also.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
So as we're getting towards the end of the podcast here, I do have one question I ask everyone, and that is, what is one book or podcast that has had a significant impact on your life?
Well, a lot of books have had significant impacts. Peter Drucker's Effective Executive. I really enjoyed podcasts like, I just listened to Joe Rogan, and he has incredible guests on there that you learn and take so much away from. But if I had to pick one, and I haven't read it in years, it would be, I think it was Napoleon Hill, The Power of a Positive Mental Attitude. That was more important to me than the other one, Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Power of a Positive Mental Attitude was a life changer.
Interesting. That is one of the Napoleon Hill books I haven't read. I read Think and Grow Rich, Not Outwitting the Devil, but I haven't read that one. So I'll have to put that one back on the list. But I like asking this question too, because I've got a line item in my budget just for Amazon books.
Yeah, that's great. What's the one that you would answer if you were to be asked?
So the biggest one for me was Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
Absolutely changed my viewpoint on what it helped me to define what an entrepreneur was.
Mhm.
So my thing was, I grew up, my dad was an engineer, mom was a psychologist, mom was in private practice, but neither one of them really had that entrepreneurial thing, and they had no idea what the hell to do with me, their entrepreneurial son, like at all. And they couldn't communicate on the same level that I was at. So it was really difficult for me. I didn't, something seemed different. It seemed like an orchestra that was playing off tune, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, no, that's fine." Just something wasn't right.
Yeah.
And for me, when I read that book, it made 100% sense, because I had two parents who were, solidly middle class, really good professions, really good careers. And then so seeing Robert's side of things, where his poor family was his dad, who was a college professor, who had a good, well-educated, very intelligent, but understanding there was another side to it, and there was a reason why, entrepreneurship was different than that. And I had tried for years. I tried to start a video production company when I was 16, and didn't really understand what it was, and just didn't have the skills to be able to make that happen. And as soon as I read that book, it made sense. So yeah.
Yeah. And what was your pivot when that didn't fail, when it failed?
So the pivot was, I started my own company, and that's when I started becoming a keynote architect. And that's where the keynote architect came from, a couple of pivots. I started with traditional online courses. I've been doing it for almost 15 years at that point. And I'm like, okay, well, now I need to pivot to something different. And that's where that came from. Yeah. Sometimes it just takes us in a different path, and we just have to have a checkpoint and stop and say, all right, why isn't this working, and where do I need to go?
There you go. That's it.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today. I really appreciate it, Tyler.
Completely my pleasure, Andrew. It's awesome what you're doing. I hope lots of people listen to all your podcast episodes. And if anybody wants to, check out Learning to Dad with Tyler Ross, where we have a little bit different angle and flavor, but they're fun conversations too.
Sounds good. I'll make sure that there is a link in the description, so people can not only learn a little bit more about you, your academy, the things that you're doing, but will also be able to check out the podcast.
You're the man, Andrew.
Awesome, man. Have a great rest of the day today.
You too.
Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Tyler, check out the links in the description.